this is a recipe I don't have a name for. I used pasta. I just basically threw some canned turkey and some veggies. These tomatoes were getting old, so I got them. What you see there is the tomatoes are floating in a bowl of water, which was poured from a boiling kettle. So they've basically been floating in boiling water. And I cut the ends off before I put them in. This is how you peel a tomato. You cut the skin somewhere, and then you pour boiling hot water over them and let them sit a few minutes. So I just peeled the garlic. I didn't crush it this time. I simply peeled it, because sometimes that's actually easier when you only have a couple of pieces of it. Pretty much every dinner recipe I ever make starts with sauteed garlic and onions if I have them. They go in a frying pan with some fat, maybe poultry fat, butter, olive oil, coconut oil, whatever your thing. Yes, even avocado oil, you can use that too. So I'm just basically slicing the garlic and onions, and then I'll stick them in that little bowl to be taken over to the stove and sauteed. All my frying pans are cast iron. I think there was a year that I had one of those horrible non-stick skinny things, and man, that heat is so uneven. It cools down and it heats too fast. It heats up too fast. Yeah, I definitely prefer my cast iron pans. And by not using soap on them and by drying them quickly on the stove after I do wash them, I've kept them well seasoned. And I think once in my life I've had to re-season a pan. And it got, I don't know, washed too well or something, and I had to cover it over with grease and put the pan in the oven and bake it. Yeah. Most of the time, though, the grease you're using to fry is re-seasoning the pan as you go. The birds have gone off because I had the background audio of the movie audible, and it picked up them singing, so now they're like, oh, there's one of our birds in the room. Let's get territorial and sing. And I'm going to keep that up for a little while, but if the other bird goes away, they'll quit. So we're going to have a little bit of green singer finch in the background. It sounds like they've already quit. Sometimes when they get too loud, I have to hang them somewhere else because I can't take it anymore. So, yeah, I sliced up this onion fast enough that I really didn't have problems with my eyes. That, by the way, is a really interesting knife that I got at a yard sale in 1982. And it has a serrated edge where it's groups of serration that point in opposite directions. So, like, you get a group that's slanted towards the front, then you get a nodule, then you get a group that's slanted towards the back, then you get a nodule, all the way along the blade. I've never sharpened it. I don't know how you would sharpen it with those serrations, and it has always remained sharp enough to really injure you. The reason I use the other one more often, or appear to when I'm cooking, is because it's got some weight to it, and its wide flat blade is nice for picking stuff up. And when sharpened, it's just a little bit sharper than this one. So like if I'm cutting meat, the serrated edge will tear more than it cuts. But when it comes to fruits and vegetables, things like oranges and tomatoes, this little black vintage knife is amazing. I mean, it was already old and tired. And it's carbon steel, so you actually, it can actually stain. Although I think it rusted once, and I gave it some oil, and that was the end of that. I just keep it clean and dry and hang it back up on the magnet thing. So here I was going to take the tomatoes out. I thought, no, I'll burn my fingers. So instead I just drained the water off. And then, when I brought the tomatoes back, realized I hadn't drained all the water off because I couldn't really handle the tomatoes without burning my fingers. So I was just basically holding them back. And if I tipped it too far, the hot water would have burned my fingers. So off the water goes, and now I've got a bowl into which I can put the tomato meat. See, I just give it a squeeze, and the skin slips off like a sleeve because it's been soaking in that boiling hot water. And I didn't even cut these because I knew they'd break apart in the frying pan. Oh, little fragments of skin remained with the tomato in this case. But if you have to peel your tomatoes, especially, for instance, if you have an ileostomy or colitis, and you have to worry about blockages, this is how you have tomatoes without skins. And I simply put that skin in the compost and forget all about it. Goodbye, tomato skin. Isn't that neat? Works with all types of tomatoes. Roma tomatoes are nice because they have a lot of thick meat, so they hold up better. They last longer in cooking. You're more likely to have bits of solid bits. And basil. I have a fresh basil in the basil plant in the window, so I gave it a severe pruning because about this time of year it always starts to look a little sickly. And so I cut off all the surviving leaves, cut the branches back, and give it some fertilizer, and either it grows again or I repot something else into its pot, like my Boston fern. You don't have to do a whole lot of chopping on the herbs, but a little bit. And I think I also went downstairs to my spare fridge. We've got a little bar fridge downstairs where Mr. keeps his dealcoholized beer, and we also keep the rabbit food. Rabbit food is a large gallon-sized snap lid tub full of fresh herbs. There's the parsley and the methi. I'm not sure what methi is. It's some kind of Greek or Italian green herb that I read about it. Bunnies love it, so I got some, and I thought, it seems to me it'd probably go well with the tomatoes. So I tossed in some of the fresh parsley from the rabbit food collection, and I tossed in. Notice, by the way, I'm throwing aside the leaves that are not good condition. They're not going to have good flavor, and they may even bring bad flavor to your meal. So pull out any leaves that are not crisp and bright and green. If they're going yellow, don't use them. Now, this is a herb mixture called poultry spice, and it's your basic European fives. You've got your parsley, your sage, your rosemary, your thyme, and your marjoram. And in this case, also some black pepper and onion powder. There you go. Parsley, sage, rosemary, marjoram, black pepper, and onion powder. So there's no thyme in it. Oh, well. It's okay. And then a little bit of more black pepper, because I always put some black pepper in everything, unless I'm putting in red pepper. I don't know, it's one of those cooking rules. Same thing with the salt. Now I'm adding all of this to the tomatoes because all of that stuff will cook at about the same rate. Ground cayenne pepper. There's your red pepper. Sometimes I add both peppers. I wanted a little bit of heat to this. In the end, it had so little heat I hardly even noticed. Moment of thinking and went, oh yeah, I want to put carrots in this mix. Now carrots do not cook at the same rate as tomatoes and greens. Oh, the canned turkey. Now, the canned turkey's already cooked, so it doesn't need very much time in the sauce either. So, and it was full of, showing you the ground cayenne. The turkey that I canned was also full of liquid, which makes nice for the sauce. So the whole plan is that I'll saute the onions and garlic until they're kind of translucent, take the edge off them, and then I'll toss in this whole bowl of stuff and let it simmer down and wind up with a really quick sauce. I mean, most of the work involved was getting this turkey out of the jar. I gave the jar to the dog. It's too bad I didn't include the clip. It's in my vlog, but I didn't think to include the clip here. She had such a hard time getting her tongue down to that jar. She didn't get to the bottom. Tried to give it a little bit of chopping because the turkey chunks were pretty large, and I kind of thought it might be nice to cut down the tomatoes a bit. This is an Inuit knife from Alaska. This is the kind of blade that the Inuits use. They do everything with it, from scraping hides to cutting meat to cutting blocks of snow for making winter shelters, aka the igloo. That is the kind of knife they use. It's really nice for mincing herbs and things. When I grab it, I'm always glad to have it. You can also use it as a pastry cutter for pie crust. It's a really nice knife. It used to be my mother's. I think she decided not to keep it when she was downsizing, and I was lucky enough to be able to grab it. So I didn't add any moisture to that bowl. That's the moisture that was in the turkey that you see the liquid that you see just under the surface. So I've got my onions and garlic there, and I'm probably right now getting the pan. The pan's always on the stove, so I just turn on the heat. And very often there's enough grease left over from the last turkey bacon frying. Water for the pasta. I was going to put the carrots in the water and realized, no, they're going to overcook if I put them in the water before it starts boiling. So I put them in with the pasta. Figure this is a long cooking pasta. Now, if you were using a short cooking pasta, like your typical grocery store pasta, then you would put the carrots in at the start, because that stuff is cooked in 2 or 3 minutes. But this pasta here takes more like 5 to 10 minutes to cook. So I put the carrots in with the pasta, because that's about how long the baby carrots take. And I was going to set them there and realize, no, it's going to wind up melting in the heat. And I kind of made some room over here. Mr. Slippered Feet are there because he's working on my computer. It was giving me grief that day. Oh, and the handle you can see in the view, there goes the onions and garlic into the hot frying pan. The handle you can see in the view, I really need to clean the dust off it. That's a vintage tap. The kind of from back when you used to have a hot tap and a cold tap separately. From an apartment I lived in ages ago where the tap broke. It was no longer useful, but I thought it's just too darn pretty. So I used silicone caulking to make a little drip. And then to make it even weirder, I hang it upside down so it looks like it's dripping upward. That's a really cute tap. It's one of those fun decorations. For the longest time, I had it over a fireplace, so it looked like you had a water tap just above the fireplace. And I just put a nail in the wall and hang the pipe over the nail and close the little decorative collar, and there you go. We've got a tap on the wall. And over top of the stove is equally amusing. It's like, oh, you got water delivered to your fireplace or to your stove. And then it's upside down because, frankly, you can't use it to get water. And anyways, it's quirkier that way. So yeah, remember when you're frying the garlic and onions to periodically move them around so that they don't burn and stick. At this point I decided, they're cooked enough. They'll finish cooking with the rest of this stuff. And poured in the bowl of tomatoes and herbs and meat and spices and salt and pepper. And there was a lot of water in this. Oh my goodness, I thought to myself, that's going to take a long time to boil down. So in this case, I'd never reduced the heat. I just tried to expose the water to the hot sides more so that it would boil. Because when water like that, because it's not water, it's meat juices, when flavored liquids like that boil down, they make the best sauces. So it's actually really fortunate I wound up with a very saucy, in fact, there wasn't any sauce when we were done, but everything was coated with a flavorful brown residue in the food, It wasn't just the cooked food. It just adds a lot of flavor. It concentrates it. So I'm using the spatula to break down the larger chunks of meat and tomato and move them around and stir them so that stuff will, be uniform and we won't have any big lumps and chunks. Nobody wants to stick their fork in and pull out half a limp cooked tomato. Nobody wants that. Even people who like tomatoes don't want that. Not in a dish like this. And the same goes, you don't want like giant chunks of meat. Yeah, this canned turkey turned out beautifully. I'm really glad I did it. I'll do more of that. It was the best way to deal with an oversized turkey, too. It was too big to fit in anyone's stove. Barely fitted in the fridge for defrosting. And nobody could eat that much turkey, so it was going to have to be packaged anyway. And you can't really can cooked turkey, because when you can it, you cook it in the can. Whereas if you take pre-cooked turkey, you're going to wind up overcooking it when you can it. Because the darn thing is at pressure for an hour and a half in the canner. So you really don't want to can cooked turkey. So if you want to have that roast turkey effect, buy a smaller turkey. If you get a big turkey, parcel it out into smaller things. Make your soups from your bones, cut the meat off, and do stuff like that with it. And the reason I'm canning instead of freezing is because when I'm living on the boat, I'm going to want a whole lot less refrigeration. Now, you see how briskly that's boiling? And I just kept piling it up in the middle because I noticed that it boiled best on the sides. If this was a wok, I'd do it the other way. I'd pile it up on the sides and let the water flow down in the middle of the wok. I do have a wok. I just probably going to wind up giving it up. It got so hot and humid, I opened the window. Well, it's minus 32 out there. Look at the steam. Finally, the water was boiling. I was starting to wonder if I'd get the pasta done before the sauce, or like in time for the meat sauce. That's what I was thinking of it as, is meat sauce. As you can see, the carrots are in with the pasta. And they gave me a little bit pause for concern because they never got super tender. But in point of fact, when we stuck our fork in and bit, they were perfect. They were still firm enough to feel like vegetables, but there was no chew left to them. You could bite into them, but there was no crunch. There was no hardness left. Even someone with dentures would have been able to enjoy those carrots, but they weren't mush. Someone with no teeth could have eaten them, but they would have had texture. They had good mouthfeel. So I can say with certainty that this trick with the carrots in with the pasta was perfect. Meanwhile, the water's already boiled down to halfway on that frying pan. And the reason we open up and stir, for one thing, there was a piece of pasta that wasn't in the water yet, because the pasta goes limp when it hits the water, and then you can stir it the rest of the way in. But the other thing, and this goes for anything that's cooking that's not in a double boiler, you must move it around occasionally, or some portion of it will boil dry under the food, and water will not come in and it will not float. It will sit there and actually burn to the pot, even while it's in boiling water. So this is why we stir things. Now, if you're using these glass pots, you must never, 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 never use metal. Only wood. That's why I'm not stirring it with that spatula. When you use metal in one of those brown Corning Visions by Corning pots, you create a scratch, however microscopic, to which the food sticks. And once the food starts sticking, it's a never-ending battle to keep it stirred enough not to burn to the bottom. And then, you get frustrated and you grab the steel wool and you make the pot even worse. And then the next thing you know, you declare the pot crap. And actually, they're really nice pots. I love being able to look and see what's going on without having to open it. And with rice, that's really important, because if you're cooking rice and you open the pot, the cooking stops. Yeah, that frying pan finally boiled down to where there just really wasn't any liquid left. So I turned it off and moved it around and stirred it in. And I knew that the heat left in the pan, and that's why I like cast iron versus those little thin nonstick pans. Those things, they're already cold by now. And I wanted the pan to continue cooking the food even after the heat was turned off. Kind of like an electric burner might do when you're using one of those really thin frying pans on it. The electric burner. I was testing the carrots and they didn't seem tender enough, but I thought, well, so we might have to crunch them a bit. And I did pull them off. I did turn them off because the pasta was done. And if you overcook pasta, you get mush. I could tell it was done because it had sort of cloudy, fuzzy edges to it, sort of soft looking on the edges. There you go. I brought the camera over here and give you a good look. And yeah, they've got that sort of a softness to the edges. It says the pasta's done. I couldn't tell anything with the carrots, but I figured, we got good teeth. We like raw carrots. If they're still crunchy, we'll be fine. And yeah, it looks like I show you me checking the pot a couple of times. Into the colander, the whole thing goes. And I didn't worry about the noodle that was left in the pot because I was putting the noodles right back in the pot. And onto the stove, but the heat is off. I'm just working with it here. All I wanted to do was to be able to dump the frying pan contents. And then I'll go, oh, for crying out loud, why am I reaching over the stove? Bring it closer. And I didn't set the lid down where the frying pan had been because it's hot over there and it would have damaged the lid. So into the pot. And remember, we're not going to stir with the steel spatula. We're going to stir with the wooden spoon. I should have put my hand washing clip in here a few times. But really, it's not serious if you didn't wash your hands all over the place. You should have washed them when you were cutting up the vegetables and stuff. But in point of fact, since these foods are going immediately into germ-killing temperatures, any germs you did add to them would never grow to sufficient quantity to cause you any kind of physical harm. And then after that, my hands never touched the food. It was all utensils. So even though I do maniacally wash my hands between clips, it's not vital in a recipe like this to wash your hands. The stuff you're handling gets cooked immediately, and everything else is getting handled with utensils. So there you go. A tasty, delicious, one-dish meal. Enjoy.